What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 799. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how goes?
Oh, it goes pretty good, I would say. Had an eventful weekend. You know, the Spotlight Series, the Grand Prix, if you will, was here. And we got to not only the pleasure of playing Limited, but a new set that had released online just 3 or 4 days before the tournament. Really cool opportunity.
Yeah, that was cool. I was at home. I had plans that I couldn't really break, so I wasn't doing coverage for it, but I was watching from home, and it felt like the good old days a bit, you know, like with the GP stuff. And then also the fact that the set had just come out was really cool as well. And something else really cool happened. We've got a special guest on the line, also from Denver, Colorado. Just happens to be the champion of that event. It's Andrew Baeckstrom. BK, welcome back on LR. And how are you doing, sir?
Oh, Marshall, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. And Luis, also...
You chat with me often?
Yeah, we chat often.
You're here.
No, it's great, man. You know, I didn't think I was going to be playing too many more tournaments, but when a local limited event comes to town, well, you know, I got to play that. And turns out that was good enough to get the win.
Oh, incredible. It was 1,200 plus players in that field, and somehow BK came away the champion. We're going to talk to him and Luis about their tournament experience. Also, this is our format overview show. I got to say, especially with a high-level tournament in the rearview mirror now, it has never felt more deep into the format after the set's been out for a week and a half or whatever.
Incredible.
Ever. But here we are. So we've got our thoughts on the format, where it's at, what we've learned since it's come out, and also some interesting strategies and discoveries that you two made going into the tournament itself on that very short timeline. We're also going to do a couple of crack-a-packs and talk about cards that, of note that have surprised us one way or the other. That's all lined up on the show this week. Before we get into that, I wanted to say thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. And you get access to some cool extra perks. And of course, it supports the show. We really appreciate everybody who supports us there. We also want to thank Ultimate Guard for their support of the show. They make the best stuff in the business. If you need ways to protect your cards, your decks, your collection, you're going to find it at Ultimate Guard. Premium products. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that when you pick it up and hold it, you know that somebody put a lot of thought and effort, not only into the design, but into the materials as well. They really are the best in the business. If you want to check out their full line of products, it's ultimateguard.com, and you can buy their stuff at your favorite local game store or online retailer. Thank you, Ultimate Guard. We do appreciate it. So I wanted to kick things off here with you two. I wanted to talk about the tournament as a whole. Luis, more or less, this mirrors roughly like what a Grand Prix was when those were running. Is that correct?
Oh, it's basically exactly a Grand Prix. Like, it was 8 rounds on day 1, sealed deck. You had to go 6 and 2 to make day 2. So that was actually a tougher cut. Grand Prix at the end were 6 and 3. Mm-hmm. But the one fewer round isn't really even that different, because Grand Prix had buys. And when you had a bunch of people with buys in, that actually each 3-buy player counts like 8 people for tournament size, because you have a 3-0. It takes 8 people to generate a 3-0. Mm-hmm. So it's actually pretty comparable in terms of number of rounds. And then it's 2 drafts on day 2, cut to top 8, draft for the top 8. I mean, straight up from the Grand Prix playbook, I would say. Yeah, so
these are very, very similar, if not exactly the same, as what we would have expected from a Grand Prix from before for players who were around for that era. Big field. Over 1,200 players showed up to play in this thing. I mean, there's certainly demand for these type of events still. They kind of show that every time they do one of these big open field limited tournaments, and hopefully, down the line we'll get more of these. But at any rate, what did it look like for you two going in with this extremely short window, between when the set was released and when you were going to sit down to open up your sealed pool on Saturday?
Well, it was really cool, kind of in the vibe of the Grand Prix. This is the only tournament I'm going to this year. BK, of course, now is going to be going to the Pro Tour. And because it was in Denver, we had a lot of friends who wanted to visit. So we ended up having my buddy Max Smith, you recognize him from the Cube videos. He's on the draft server, and Squirrel Loot are one of the longtime mod and a good friend of ours. So Squirrel and Matt came and stayed with me and Gabby here, and then BK would come over every day. There was no getting rid of him, so we were able to kind of get this like testing camp going, where a lot of what we were doing was just drafting dragons. Trying to figure out like is this, what works in this format? Because we only had a couple days until the event started. So there's a lot of gains to be had. And BK mentioned this in his winter interview. It's something that he talked about. The ham was actually crucial. So if you don't know the Ham TV, Kyle Rose, who streams on Twitch, he had been jamming and he was forcing this orb deck, this Dragonstorm globe deck, where it's like you use dragons, Dragonstorms, Dragonstorm globes, Dragonstorm forecaster to go get the globe and all that. And it ended up, we tried drafting it and we're like, wow, this actually is sick. Like this is really, really cool. So we were able to do it a bunch of times and kind of come to the conclusion like, oh yeah, you know what? This is awesome. Like this is like a very legit strategy. And we ended up kind of committing to soft forcing that deck if it came down to it. Like we weren't gonna necessarily go in and play it 100% of the time, but we sure were gonna have a good chance of playing it, and we ended up doing so, or at least those of us who made day 2.
Yeah. What about you, BK? What were your thoughts on that strategy going in?
Yeah, I was a little nervous about maybe forcing it. But I had definitely seen the upsides. The obvious upsides being, anytime you're drafting a 5-color deck in a gold format, there's both going to be a lot of powerful gold cards, and then, people are going to be trying to draft for their clans. So, somebody's teamer, and then they open up an awesome Jeskai card, and it's like, oh, maybe they can't quite get to the white mana, so they pass that to you. And so you can have really insane drafts where you just have tons of amazing bombs, and then you have access to all the best stuff from the different colors. One of the big upsides, we can get into all the nice little details about the Dragonstorm globe deck. But one of the great things about it was that you just kept getting paid off in every direction for just having dragons in your deck. I joked about it in the interview, but it was just like, oh, wow, when I have a bunch of dragons, now all my exiles, my common removal spells just work better. My Dragonstorms go from being they're all pretty solid about the amount of mana you'd expect to pay for that effect the first time. And then you just get to keep rebuying them. And the dragons themselves, most of them have omens on them, so they have flexibility in terms of when you and how you play with them in the game. And so it was just kept getting reinforced as we kept trying it. We were discovering all these nice little benefits to forcing this deck, and it was like, well, okay, if it's just going to keep working, I guess we'll just have to keep doing it. Yeah.
Rewinding a little bit, what about for sealed? Did you guys do any sealed practice, or was it all draft and then you kind of adapt it?
Oh, we did a good amount of sealed practice. We actually even got a box of Tarkir, and we're building paper sealed decks and playing them against each other. Sealed pretty much is what you would expect out of a format like this. You're going to try to play 5 colors and play all your best cards and hope you have good enough cards.
Yeah.
There is plenty of complexity to building your sealed deck, and I think that there's obviously gains to be had, and the games are complicated. All that is true, but I do think it's still it's a 5-color format with a lot of fixing. Sealed is mostly going to be how many of these really powerful cards did you open? There's a big component of that, and did you open the lands that go with them?
So I guess the question for you, Luis, is how many of those powerful cards did you open, and did you open the lands that go with them?
I opened the lands. I opened 0 powerful cards, basically. My best card was the Ambling Stormshell, the 3 blue 5/9 turtle, and that's a good card.
Yeah.
But it's not a card I would put on my wish list for opening and sealed. It's just it's on the better end of rares, but not near the best. And certainly opening 0 of the top 25 cards in the set was pretty tough. So I built a 5-color deck that had good mana and a lot of removal. Not even the best removal, but pretty good removal. Still, it actually had trouble with dragons. It had 2 of the roast dragon and had Molten Exhale, so it could kill a lot of things as long as they weren't big flyers, which is kind of unfortunate because that's the name of the format. And I got to do some cool stuff with the Dragonfire Blade that gives +2/+2 and hexproof from monocolor. I had a Codis, the Sultai 2/1 indestructible at Villainous Wealth when you hit them. And like putting a blade on that or putting counters from the Sultai, the Karo Broodkeeper was pretty good too. The dragon that gives +2/+2 and flying. But ultimately, I went 5-3, losing, of course, in the last round. And I lost like one match straight up to Jeskai Revelation in a deck that, otherwise wasn't that good. And, I was able to make some gains in the gameplay in that match, but it's just like they just cast Jeskai Revelation 2 of the 3 games. And that card's pretty close to unbeatable. And then I lost in the last round to a really brutal series of like, I had a 5/5 flying hexproof dragon and they were at 5. So they were and they had no cards in hand. So it's like next turn, you're probably dead, or maybe you draw a chump blocker. They drew Jeskai Shrinekeeper to 3/3 haste, played it, hit me, went up to 6 life because it gains 1 life, and that let them pick up their white Dragonstorm and played it. So then on my next turn, I was able to like bounce one of the tokens, hit them back down to 1, and pass the turn with them at 1 with a Jeskai. I bounced a token, hit them down to 1, played a thing. Next turn, they couldn't attack with the Shrinekeeper, passed back. I attacked, they chumped with Shrinekeeper. So once again, now they're at 1. They're facing this down. I'm at 5 because I take 3 from the Shrinekeeper. They drew the common haste dragon that pumps fire breathing, the Feral Stormshriek. It had exactly enough mana and red mana and everything to just play it, and that was it.
That's a heck of a 3-turn sequence. Wow.
Yeah, that was tough. So
holy smokes.
Pretty disappointed not to make day 2. Mac didn't make day 2 either. His deck was even worse than mine. And so all our hopes and dreams were in the hands of BK because Squirrel also he had a pretty good deck, but just didn't quite get there. So it was down to BK. And going 5-3 there was pretty disappointing. We're just not going to play another tournament this year. I was really hoping to draft.
I know you wanted to get to the draft.
Had this like awesome draft strategy too.
Yeah. BK, how was your sealed?
Yeah, it was interesting. I didn't open anything crazy, and I even lost the first round. Managed to win the rest, but the preparation definitely helped a bunch because what I did have was a pool full of like good cards, but no great cards. Like my best cards were like Flamehold Grappler and Winter Night Stories, the kind of thirst for knowledge for creatures. And what I was able to do, though, was by having practice sealed, kind of understand some of the more niche effects that I needed to have access to in my deck in order to be competitive with other strong 5-color value piles that you might face. So, for instance, 2 cards that come to mind for that one was Sarkhan's Resolve, the Giant Growth Plummet split card, common and green. And, not a genius innovation, but it was really important to kill people's rare and mythic dragons. And then the other one that was really big was Heritage Reclamation. That's the disenchant that can also exile a card and cantrips when it does so for 1 and a green. And that was fantastic, and just kind of picked up on that by noting, hey, there's a bunch of the common and uncommon removal spells or artifacts and enchantments, and then the rare cycle, there being a cycle of rare sieges in the set, and sagas, made it clear that it was like, oh yeah, actually having access to a disenchant is pretty reasonable. And so I was able to, without having like the crazy win the game on the spot cards, able to compete with the other strong 4 or 5-color piles, and managed to go 7-1 ultimately on day 1, winning my last 7 in a row. And I felt pretty good about that. Obviously was super disappointed that Luis didn't make it. But I knew I had some pressure on me with everyone else getting knocked out. Yeah,
carrying the torch forward. Okay. So that leads us to the globe deck that we've been talking about. So, Luis, do you want to break it down? Do you want to have BK do it? I don't know which one of you wants to take the lead on it, but I want to know what's the deal with this deck. How does it work? Why does it work? You guys mentioned that there's the dragon synergies and that type of stuff, but can you give me the big picture view on it?
Yeah, I'll kind of set the stage, but obviously BK will have plenty to say about it too, since he even has more professional hands-on experience with it. So the globe deck, Dragonstorm Globe is kind of the headliner, and this is what we call the deck, and that's also an initially quite underrated piece. But really, this is a dragon deck, and it's not even that complicated. You're trying to play cards like Dragonstorm and Exhales and Dragonstorm Globe along with dragons. So what are we doing? We're putting all the cards that say dragon on them and as many dragons you can get.
Getting a theme
set
here.
Called Dragonstorm. Okay, yeah. In retrospect, maybe not the hardest thing to figure out, but I think the reason this deck works out really nicely is the mana is there, and critically, this is one of the things that we kind of figured out as we were playing. You don't need to take the tri-lands and duels as high as you would. Because if you get some globes, that goes a long way. Okay. And that's a really big benefit because you end up in a spot where you get to use your early picks on removal. Like frequently you'll take something like Caustic or Molten Exile over even like a tri-land if you have like 2 globes and some duels. It's not like this deck wants 0 non-basics. Of course, you play plenty of those, but you really don't need to kind of be like, putting everything in on getting these lands, because between Dragonstorm Globe, Encroaching Dragonstorm, it's the green one, Roamer's Routine, if you miss on those, that's actually a pretty good amount of fixing. Like you do end up being able to cast your spells in under those circumstances.
And you feel like you're like other people are fighting, like everybody wants the lands, right? Like kind of no matter what pretty strategy much. You're on. And
yeah, I mean, you can often, sometimes at a table, you'll be like the only one interested, especially in the allied color ones, like a blue-black land or something like that, or a green-white land. The blue-black's a very common good land for this deck because of it just likes to, it's almost always base blue, and then often Caustic Exile is like the best common for it. So you end up being able to utilize that. But yeah, I mean, you get to deprioritize lands a little bit, and you want to pick up globes. You want to pick up Dragonstorms. In particular, the white and blue Dragonstorms are very strong. The red one's actually quite strong too. The green one's good, but it's actually not as good as a globe. I don't really prioritize it. And then the black one is largely not that good because that's just really not what these decks tend to be really about so much.
That's the Tendrils one?
Yeah, that's the Drain Them for 2 and Surveil 2. It just, you don't need to be doing like that kind of small ball stuff. That's not really what you're trying to do. And then Exhales, I mean, all the Exhales, well, actually the green one is and the white one are the worst, but Molten Exhale, Caustic Exhale, Dispelling Exhale, the Grixis Exhales are such a huge piece of this deck. And Caustic Exhale in particular, when you go turn 3 Globe, Exhale your creature, like that is just so disgusting.
That's gnarly.
And you can easily do that. You'll often have a dragon in your hand. Molten Exhale, of course, kills everything, even at instant speed. And one of the stars of the show really is Dispelling Exhale. It turns out, as we've seen over the last couple years, the 2 mana counter, unless you pay 2 spell, doesn't need much more to be quite good. It is frequently one of the better blue commons, even without much of a kicker. And this one, reveal a dragon or have a dragon in play to make it, make them spend 4. That's really good upside, because counters like this are almost always good in the first couple turns of the game, like the first 5 turns of the game, right? If you have a Dispelling Exhale on curve, you're pretty confident that you're going to be able to counter something. Well, the downside is when you draw them on turn 7, but this format has a lot of expensive cards, and paying 4 is a lot. You're just able to counter things most of the time you need to.
BK, the funny thing that stands out to me about this deck is that there's all these little pockets of things that were presented to us that you could do. Like, oh, I could make the Dragonstorm stack, or I could, try to make my Exiles a little bit better and do the dragon thing. But this seems like the green light to just do all of them at once. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, there's a lot of cards. There's kind of 2 camps of cards in this set. There's the cards in this set which kind of like they work within their theme. They sort of do something for the clans. A lot of the Mardu cards kind of immediately come to mind with this. And then there's the cards where it's like, you just look at it and you're like, yeah, maybe you have something to do with a set theme, but I'll tell you what you are. You are a damn powerful magic card. And when you're doing this, you get to put a lot of damn powerful magic cards in your deck. So that really works out well.
Yeah. How much does that lead the way as far as, because we've mentioned the dragon specific synergies and stuff, but particularly in sealed, we've seen it, but even in draft, there's just so many cards that are just these haymakers, like, really over the top powerful stuff. If you look at the cards, by the way, I was held off on 17 lands until today, but I am not surprised to see what I'm seeing, where if I just go by games in hand win rate, just all cards in this set, the top cards are these crazy expensive and nearly unbeatable card. So the number one card is Ugin, Eye of the Storm. So a 7-drop, but colorless, which is, I think, what's, giving it a lot of help there. But like the next card is Jeskai Revelation. That's 7 mana over 3 colors. Yeah. And then Meringue River Regent, which again, I think is actually higher because it's easier to cast, although of course, very powerful. Then card I've never beaten or opened, Ireni, the Song Unending. That's an 8-ball, right? And that thing just kills you. Dragonback Assault, 6 mana over 3 colors. And then Elspeth is our first 5 or less mana card here, right? I mean, these cards, these are obscenely over the top type cards, right? I mean, we're not talking about, a lot of times you'll see efficiency kind of rule the day, but I mean, going down a little further, Baator is on here. Freaking Inspired Ultimatums on the list somehow. Like, it is very clear that this format's going over the top, and you kind of get that with this deck as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the and I think there's both this element of going over the top of what maybe some of the clan synergies are, but then one of the other great things you do when you're drafting this deck is by picking up all of that removal, like Louis said, a lot of the stronger clan synergies, whether we're talking about in particular like the Mardu related ones, or rely on you having things on the board. So just being able to pick apart something, not waiting to that block step for making your interaction sort of happen, but cutting it off at the head is a really powerful way to do it. Something that's true of a lot of the big bombs that you mentioned is they're really good at helping you catch up on the board. And so that's one of the things that you really get to appreciate when you're drafting this deck. And so not only do you get those, but there's also some strong cards even at the common and uncommon level who are in that sort of 4 and 5 mana range that help you catch up on the card. And so I'm talking about things like Constrictor Sage or Marshall's favorite, the Mana War variant of this set, Ice Ridge Serpent, and Sagu.
I really like that card.
Yeah, Sagu. Well, one of the things we discovered about that card is there's a lot of elephants in this format. 5/5 tokens, really, really nice to clean up there. And so we, early on, we were like, oh, wow, look at these devotees. This Teamer Devotee, it's a 2 mana 3/3 and it fixes your colors. We still played Teamer Devotee at the end, but we realized sort of as we were drafting and playing the format more, it's like, oh, no. Actually, I want something that's going to lock down a lot of things, not get maybe beaten by a combat trick and have some kind of maybe impact when it comes down, because that's actually going to be more helpful to catching up than just having like another random 3 mana 3/3 that could maybe hopefully trade, but probably won't even as my opponent's synergies come online.
Yeah. Let's talk about forcing. This is something that we generally don't like to do, right? The idea of knowing what deck you're going to draft before you sit down is usually one that is fraught with peril. It's kind of like the, a broken clock is right twice a day type thing, where occasionally the stars will align and your deck will be open and you'll draft it. But all the other times that you decide to just brute force a deck and it wasn't the right one for your seat, you're just doing it wrong, right? And the idea, behind being the best drafter that you can be is generally that you'd like to be able to let your seat dictate what deck to draft, and you have the skill set to understand how that archetype works, what's good, what's not, and how to navigate that. However, there are times when, depending on how long the format's been out and kind of what the metagame looks like and how good a deck is, and in this case, how hard is it to actually get the deck? I mean, we're talking about a 4 or 5 color deck here, so it's kind of, there's a lot of paints to use to make your picture here. It actually can be correct to say, no, we found a strategy that we think is better, and it's early and it's wide open. And that's what you guys had here. What was your mentality going in, particularly for you, BK, in the drafts in day 2 about, were you planning on playing this deck before you sat down?
No, definitely not. I mean, the experience I kind of had in testing the format was I had a lot of I had a bunch of bad experiences from just sort of trying to be open. And so I think it's kind of instructive of sort of what drafting this format is like. So let's say you start off early on with a card like a war effort. And it's like, okay, I'm red, but I could be red-blue, I could be red-white. Those are kind of the enemy color pairs. And so then those fit nicely into multiple different clans. So there's like sort of a lot of possibilities for where I can go when I start off with this red card. The reality of the way the format works, though, is that since there's so much cross-overlapping synergies between the clans, if somebody to the right of me is in red, they're just taking my shock brigades. I'm not getting them. And so I don't even have the flexibility of like, oh, I can go red in a bunch of different directions. And so kind of what was actually working out better was just, hey, just try to take powerful cards, whether that be bombs or just removal, and removal in particular, because removal is kind of the thing. The good removal spells is the thing that everybody wants, no matter what it is they're drafting. So I think if you watch, we could talk about each of my drafts, but if you look at my top 8 draft, I start off that draft with 4 cards in 4 colors. It was something like Caustic Exile, Molten Exile, Encroaching Dragonstorm, Sig Appraiser.
Okay.
And so it's like, I don't know where I'm going, but the place I didn't want to be was just sort of like having like a good uncommon or 2 for like one archetype that then just gets cut off. There in that spot, yes, I'm probably going to need to throw a pick or 2 away. I ended up not. I got to play all of those cards, but I've had drafts that start off like that, and then it's like, and then I'm getting like a 6-pick Narset or something, and it's like, oh, okay, actually, all right, I'm gonna get to play that Molten Exile, that Sig Appraiser, and now it looks like because I got such a good gold card so late, Jeskai is what's open, and so you can definitely stake your claim or try to be open, but I think you have to be pretty patient, because if it turns out somebody to the right of you is in like kind of overlapping like 2 out of 3 colors, you're going to have a bad time, even if you were relatively open.
Okay. Luis, what are your thoughts on I guess we'll call it soft forcing?
Well, I think a thing that was also true in this tournament, which will not typically be true, is it was really early on in the format. Like we're here in, less than week 1, like by Sunday, let's say you started drafting on Tuesday and it came out online. You had Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then you were playing at the tournament Saturday, and then Sunday was time to draft. So like, I would say, of course, the people BK played against, especially in day 2, are going to be skilled. But how likely are they to have done 5 drafts versus 10 drafts versus 15 drafts? Whereas like, I mean, we had it set up so like me, Mac, BK, and Squirrel were in our living room, and we would just someone would draft on the big screen, and then they'd go play it on a different computer, and then someone else would draft on the big screen. We were just chaining drafts.
Wow.
So we kind of got to do, 30 drafts or whatever it was, probably more. And so given that, if I made day 2, I mean, I think the number I quoted you before the show was like 80%. That's about how likely I felt like I was going to be to draft this deck. Like, yes, I could open a great Mardu or Jeskai card and then get past another one. And then like, imagine a world where I like open a good Jeskai rare, get past a good Jeskai uncommon, and then a 3rd pick Mystic Monastery, and I never make my way off Jeskai. Like that could definitely happen. Mm-hmm. Most of the time though, I'm going to end up taking the best card out of the first couple packs. And like BK said, just ending up with a bunch of powerful cards and getting to play them all. And the thing it's really cool about this deck is, first of all the big rares basically are dragons anyway, so it's not like it's difficult to figure out that's what you should be doing. But even past that, like you can take the ultimatums and all those other things and just get so much value. Like it is really easy for this deck to just completely pop off. Yeah,
to me there's been a few times when formats have evolved to the point that I kind of knew what I was going to be doing before I sat down, but it's very, very rare. I think the perfect storm that needs to come together is that it always has been at least 3 colors, that a format that supported at least 3 colors. I've never had a format where there was only a 2-color deck that I felt like I could draft for an extended period of time by deciding I'm going to draft it before I sit down. There have been windows. They always happen early in the format. Remember your run, Luis, with blue-black with the Organ Hoarder deck?
Yeah, Midnight Hunt.
And you just, you were just like, I'm just going to do it again, because it was like people just hadn't caught on yet, and they were trying out, 10 different color pairs as a group, and Luis was like, already knew that this was one that it was very deep, very powerful, and eventually he finally was forced to not. But for the first couple of days, you were just winning everything with that deck. And, so those windows have popped up. In order for it to be sustainable, that's very, very rare. It doesn't happen very often. But I have had it happen before. I remember in what was the stupid Harry Potter? Strixhaven? I was playing Teamer in that. Like almost every draft, I was drafting Teamer. And it was like that color trio was deep enough. The fixing was there that like it just supported kind of whoever wanted to do it. And to me, when you get up to the 4 or even 5 color level, that's the same thing. It's kind of like, well, it would be hard to imagine a seat where you just would not be able to draft a deck like this early in the format if all the tools were there, and it turns out that they are here. So that's kind of the big recap on that. This isn't an endorsement on, it's okay to force now, but there are windows where, you could really take advantage of a meta game and a particular set, and do so. And I would do that. I think it's correct to do so when you find something and you're ahead of the curve. The curve moves very quickly these days though. So, you really, the window to do that usually ends up being pretty small. With that in mind, a lot of times when you play 4 or 5 color decks, there becomes this question, this is a old school kind of cube archetype as well, which is, what do you prioritize? Is it the fixing or is it the payoffs? And I wanted to throw that question at you guys about this type of deck. If I do want to try out the all dragons 5 color ish Dragonstorm, globe deck or whatever, what are my priorities in the draft? How does that work?
Number one priority is just going to be your like really great cards, Meringue, River Regent, any big bomb. Like those are the least replaceable. You don't want to, like miss out on your chances of those. Mm-hmm. I would say in general, like you have to balance it where you want the Exhales pretty badly. You want Dragonstorm globes pretty badly. Lands, I think, are less priority than either of those things. And then like the common dragons, ideally at the end of a draft, you end up in a spot where you have like a combination of common, or uncommon rare, enough dragons, enough Dragonstorms, enough globes, and enough removal. And it's not that one of these is more important than the other. You just need to have all of them. Like you okay. Want to have a combination of all those things, and being able to kind of find a good balance for that. That's kind of the skill of the deck. That's kind of what will take. It takes a bit of practice to kind of get to, but I would say early on, after bombs, which are basically always the number one priority. I mean, unless it's like you have a bunch of bombs and going into pack 3, you really need fixing, then you might have to take fixing. But most drafts, you open one of the good rare dragons or 7 drops or whatever, you're just always going to take it, and that's easy enough. And then I would say making sure you have early plays. So the Grixis Exhales are a big part of that. Fresh Start, the -5, -0 enchantment, that sort of thing. With Caustic Exhale really standing above the rest if the mana works out for it because of that play I mentioned. The turn 3 globe into Exhale is actually really important. And then you want to make sure that you have enough fixing and enough dragons. So it's not there's no like formula of like this is the order you have them in, but I would generally say bombs, cheap removal, dragons and fixing, or fixing and dragons. I would say I take globe over all the common dragons pretty early.
Okay. What about you, BK? What's your kind of algorithm when you sit down for this deck?
Yeah, I think I largely agree with what Luis said. You want to have powerful cards. And I think it's also one of the things you want to kind of get an intuition for, try to develop is like, what are the powerful cards that don't have the rare and mythic symbol for this deck? I think something like Breaching Dragonstorm, the red Dragonstorm is one that you particularly want.
Okay.
A card. Yeah. Just the fact that you can get this sort of and the blue Dragonstorm is also up there. Both of them, what they offer you is this amazing source of card advantage and sort of like card advantage that never runs out, right? So one of the things that we're always balancing as limited players is like, how much removal do I play? How much card draw do I play? How many threats do I play? All of that. One of the nice things, though, is that when you're recurring any Dragonstorm, you're losing a bit in terms of efficiency, right? You have to repay the whole full mana cost again. But what you make up for is you're getting all of the card advantage you'll realistically need for an entire game out of one card slot in your deck and when you draw it. And that's really valuable. So, there's other cards that I would say kind of get up towards that range, like Bewildering Blizzard in blue. That's another one, kind of one of those bigger cards that also help stabilize you. I think one of the things that we discovered about this deck and about the format that we could mention just quickly is that how much less valuable certain removal effects were. So, for instance, we came way, way down on Twin Bolt and Channel Dragonfire. Those are the two deal 2 damage effects in red. The reality is those don't help you kill the bigger plays out of the big decks, but also they don't really help you that much against Mardu. Occasionally you'll play against a good Mardu card that has 2 or less toughness, but a lot of them are X3s. Like you think about Shock Brigade, the Sharpshooter. So not
tons of the uncommons.
Those aren't where we want to be. The one other thing I would sort of mention about sort of how you get into the deck is, you want the removal, you want the bigger plays, and then the fixing can kind of come later. And you kind of also would like to ideally try to hone in on what your base 1 or 2 colors are. And if you were trying to draft this deck, it doesn't have to be, but blue and green are going to be the better ones for you. So blue, you're going to get access to some nice counter spells, a couple of good removal effects, like Fresh Start, and some good card draw effects like Sig Appraiser, Focus the Mind, Bewildering Blizzard. And then in green, you're going to get access to a little bit more in the way of 5-color fixing, just from access from things like Dragon Brood Relic, Roamer's Routine. And so those are some nice base colors to be. You can be any of them, but it'll help out. And then it kind of goes toe-to-toe with like maybe why you don't prioritize the lands as much is you maybe don't know exactly which lands are going to be as valuable for you as you're just getting going. Any land's a good land, especially any tri-land kind of in this 5-color deck, but they're not so good early. And if you just end up with lots of good 5-color fixing, you both have fantastic mana. And one of the nice benefits you get is you get consistently untapped mana.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So basically BK saying as long as you have Breaching Dragonstorm, you don't need mana fixing. Does that sum it up? You're good.
Breaching Dragonstorm and Encroaching Dragonstorm, the red and green ones both. I did in both of the last 2 drafts I did on day 2, I had Breaching Dragonstorm, and in both of those occasions I got to play cards that I didn't have enough mana for in terms of color.
That's really frustrating for the opponent. You know, another way to frame this, I think, from the draft perspective about what to prioritize is in different formats that support this type of thing, there's always something that you feel a pressure to get, right? As a drafter, like I'll go back to my example of, let's say, a Vintage Cube from 5-6 years ago, you know, where there was a strategy that some people would use where basically they would look at the pack, and if there were premium cards, I'm talking like top cards, they would take it, and otherwise they would take a land for like the first pack. So they'd come away from the first pack with like 4 spells, and the rest would just be duels and tri-lands and fixing and all that kind of stuff out of the lands. And then they would just pick all the best cards going forward. And if there wasn't anything there, they would take a land. The idea behind that is, right, that the lands are plentiful. That isn't the thing that's going to slow you down. There was especially a stretch where there were just too many different types of fixing and duels, and you know the lands were just too good with the fetches and stuff. And so the hard parts to get were those top tier cards. But remember, you can always get good cards in Cube, right? It's not like you're going to end up with a bad deck. If you just have 5 colors of castable cards, your deck's probably going to be pretty strong, and it's more just about speed and making sure you get your mana underneath you. Is that reflected here? I mean, it sounds to me like you guys are both very cognizant of like getting that power level, those big high end, you know, Prince type cards locked down. Is that the thing? Is that what's going to determine you know, how good your deck is rather than access to fixing?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. In a lot of ways, you know, if we're trying to play 5 colors, if we're going to have card draw, if we're going to have ramp, we want to have a decent amount of confidence that we have inevitability to our games, that if both of us get to ultimately do what our deck's trying to do, that our deck's going to come out on top. And so I think you do want to try to make sure you ultimately are doing something powerful in this format. I mean, this isn't really a curve out tempo format, period. I've seen those decks. It is possible to make them work. But whether you're going for clan synergies or going for something even bigger like 5-color dragons, let's ultimately try to make sure your deck is ultimately going to do something that you says like, oh yeah, my deck actually functioned this game. Usually whoever deck kind of does their thing harder is the one who wins. There's moments for interaction, but you need to actually have a game plan here, and it can't just be like I played with cards that have like pretty decent stats relative to their mana cost.
Right. Luis.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem with like Obzon, for example, is the thing Obzon does isn't good. All the counter stuff just doesn't really work. So that just takes away a lot of the reasons to draft Obzon. Not saying you should never draft it, and there aren't some good Obzon rares and uncommons that maybe could pull you a little more towards it. But the Dragon deck, part of the reason it's so good is this format isn't really suited to, hey, you're about to get beaten down really quickly. That is not typically what happens in this format. And then you end up in a spot where like you have the time to develop your mana, and all of a sudden you have bunch of expensive cards, you have better cards than your opponent. If you have multiple globes, your dragons are bigger than your opponents. And unless your opponent is doing something powerful, like BK said, whether that's a Mardu deck really leaning into mobilized synergies, or maybe like a Jeskai deck that has some good counter spells and like a really good high end, you're going to overpower most people. And I think we going into this Grand Prix expected a lot of people to draft decks that weren't doing anything that powerful, that were just, I'm this clan, I'm taking these colors, and I hope my deck ends up good. And that is not typically going to be good enough in this format.
Okay, one last question, then we'll do our Crack-a-Packs kind of under the lens of this deck. One thing that stood out watching the coverage, and I actually got to hang out with Charles Wang last night. He's a friend of mine, and he also top-8'd the event. He's a incredibly good Magic player.
Seated to my left in the top 8 draft.
Was he? Yeah. And I was seated to his left at poker last night. We talked about counters, and he was really high on counter spells in the format, not just the Exhale, which is, as Luis outlined, done really, really well. In fact, all of them. We got the Exhales, by the way, BK, as our preview cards, and we were like, dang, like these are really good. And it turns out they are. Like those removal spells you mentioned do have a hard time keeping up because they really push these Exhales at common. These are really, really strong. But at any rate, we were talking about counter spells, and he was saying, I want to play blue cards. I want to get these counters. And I think that that's partially informed by, the strategy that you guys put forth, which is that like, there's not a lot of ways to interact with some of those spells that I rattled off from the top of 17 lands. Once they resolve, it's done, right? Your board got wiped. There's 2 like one-sided wraths. One of them even has a body attached to it. There's the Jeskai Revelation that Luis talked about. Like if it resolves, like it's too late, right? But one pretty nice way to combat these things is to counter them before they do. Did you guys prioritize that? Was that on your mind? How much did that play in?
Well, certainly we love Dispelling Exhale. And part of the reason, besides the fact that it's just a powerful card and good at most stages of the game, is there are a lot of 6 and 7 mana and maybe even 8 mana cards that you would really like to counter. Part of the reason I even did as well as I did in the sealed pool is I had a Dispelling Exhale and a Spectral Denial, the blue X counter. And you can beat some of the bombs by countering them. Some are harder because, like Ugin, you still get the trigger. Some of the really powerful cards don't cost tons of mana, and those are harder to counter. They sneak in. But yeah, if your opponent's got your Rethi, the Song Unending, it's not that hard, or a Death Begets All, like the 8-drop Sultai Wrath. It's not that hard to keep a counter up when they're getting to 8 mana. And that is somewhat a way to kind of exploit the format, or at least protect yourself against some of the most powerful things in the format.
Mm-hmm. Like, is Spectral Denial a card that you guys, that's the X?
That's not one I'm like super high on. I played it in my sealed because I just kind of had to. Mm-hmm. I would say that Dispelling Exhale is a lot better, but Riverwalk Technique is also, that's part of the reason that card is good, is because the 4-mana counter target non-creature spell mode, that's also really good.
It does hit a lot of stuff too. Okay, why don't we do a Crack-a-Pack? And like I said, I think it would be kind of cool. We'll let BK kind of be the final arbiter of the picks here, but we'll all give our take on it. But I kind of want BK to steer and pretend that once again, BK, that you're sitting down for that, the top 8 draft, let's say. And this is a pack that you get. And I just want to hear, and of course, Luis, your take too, about how you guys would approach this
but mostly BK's take.
But mostly BK's take. I mean, he's got to win something for, taking down that tournament, right?
He did. He won $10,000, an invitation to the Pro Tour, and an Ugin 1-of-1 plushie.
Yeah,
that's right.
But getting to guide the Crack-a-Pack talk on LR, that's the real reward.
Yeah.
First card up, it's a worthy cost. I'm going to read all the cards since we're so early in the format. This is a black sorcery, additional cost to cast it, sacrifice a creature, and you exile a creature or planeswalker.
Yeah, if you end up in a deck with like Endure synergies and mobilize stuff, you can definitely make use of this card as a removal effect. But it's certainly not something I'm particularly interested in doing. Mostly just due to the weakness of the archetype. I think this card is like a pretty reasonable card to be playing in those kinds of decks.
But not where you're wanting that you'll just flip right past this one.
I mean, I'd much rather be base red-white if I'm going to be going down that Mardu route. I don't want to be Abzan, and so black cards, which are sort of about mobilize or counter/token synergies, are kind of a immediate stay away for me.
Okay. Next is Rugged Highlands. That's the red-green gain land.
Yeah, I mean, Luis will tell you, we both love Teamer and Sultai. Those are kind of like our two favorite 3-color combinations in the format. And so anything that's like giving you good ability to splash, really just any Teamer duel is particularly premium. You mentioned 17 lands earlier. You get to look at a lot of Teamer gold cards before you, in terms of the best win rates, before you get to the second card for a lot of clans.
Yeah. Nightblade Brigade. This is the 2 and a black 1/3 death touch with mobilize 1, and when it enters, you surveil 1.
Yeah, this card offers like a nice little package. This is a black common I like. I think it's a little unassuming. I underrated this a little bit at first. It's weaker archetype, but this card is actually pretty solid. The fact that it's giving you some amount of card selection, graveyard synergies, a death touch body, potential token, mobilize synergies, it just kind of does a lot for a 3-drop common. So not anything exciting, but definitely a card to be aware of and not dismiss just because like it looks like it has kind of weak stats.
Alesha's Legacy. This is the 1 and a black instant. Target creature you control gains death touch and indestructible until a turn. I'm assuming you're not interested in this stuff.
Yeah, you reading the card explained that we weren't going to be taking the card.
Yeah, I will say very important. You shift around in sideboarding in this format. What tricks you have for the sizing of your opponent. And this one is real nice if you're going up against 5-color dragons. This card has been obnoxious to play against because it's like, my 6/5 actually does get trumped by that when I thought it was going to lock down a board of a bunch of 2/1s.
Okay, so this is a card that's on your radar not to choose, but to play around or be annoyed by. Next one I know you like because you guys have both mentioned it multiple times here. Molten Exhale. That's the 1 in a red sorcery, and you can cast it as though it had flash if you behold a dragon, and it does 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker. 4 damage at common for 2 mana. Like, what the?
Picking up instant speed is pretty great here. A lot of times people try to trick to get by your dragons, and so maybe you take a turn off from blocking, and then you just blow them out. And it's so nice that when you have a dragon out, they're a little bit more aware that you're going to have maybe a potential instant speed Molten Exile. When you don't, and then you reveal one from your hand, it can be really gross.
It's also really bad news usually because you guys are taking like 3-color dragons and all this stuff. Next is Undergrowth Leopard. This is the 1 in a green 2/2 with vigilance, and you can pay 1 and sack it to blow up an artifact or enchantment.
Super great sealed card. This is exactly the kind of 2-drop you want to play. You'd rather play with this card than some of the devotees as 2-drops because this card meaningfully interacts with sieges and some of the like static snare, fresh start type removal.
Luis, you like the leopard?
Yeah, I actually had a really annoying sealed match where they had 2 of them, and I had multiple good artifacts that they were just able to blow up. Like, This is the downside of playing 2-drops in sealed is they get bad a lot faster than you would like. But the leopard kind of has what you need to make it to the late game. So that's a really nice upside.
Agent of Kotis. This is the 1 in a blue 2/1 with renew for 3 in a blue, and you can put the 2 counters on a creature at sorcery speed. Pretty bad.
Yeah, you mostly throw this card in the garbage. If you will occasionally get the Nut Kishla Skimmer deck or Sultai deck with enough graveyard counter synergies where this makes the bar, but otherwise we don't need it.
Yeah. So right now, you guys are both on Molten Exhale, right? Like that's the standout.
Yeah, I would imagine that it's not impossible to knock that off the top of the perch, but like it is a very good card.
Yeah. Next is Riling Dawnbreaker. That's the 4 and a white 3/4 flying vigilance dragon. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, another creature you control gets +1/+0, or you can Signaling Roar it. It's a 1 and a white sorcery where you get a 2/2 soldier.
This is my least favorite dragon, maybe, of all the dragons, or very close to it.
Okay, I was going to ask about, like, what's the bar?
Well,
Because you do need critical mass of dragons, right? You can't have all mythics and amazing stuff. Like, do you dip down? I mean, this one apparently is below the bar, Luis. Is that what you're saying?
I think that the combination of not being very powerful at 5 mana, you don't care about the effect, and the 2-drop part is a white card, which is one of the least represented colors in this deck. You are not really going to be interested in this card very often.
Feel the same way, BK?
Yeah, occasionally you just have enough Dragonstorms, and white is probably the least common color that like you play in your 4 or 5 color dragon piles. So occasionally you will just need this for critical mass, but mostly you're going to dismiss this one.
Last common is Reputable Merchant. This is the Obzon with the alternate 2 cost, so it costs black, green, white. It's substitute 2 colorless for any of those. It's 2 mana. It's a 2/2, and when it enters or dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. This one's pretty disappointing, right? Just power level wise, it just feels below the curve compared to some of the others.
It's also in the weakest clan, so it's like you're looking at this and you're really going to hybrid, this thing. Like, that's just not going to happen that often.
Yeah, one of the nice things is like, oh, okay, I'm Obzon. I get to play my hybrid gold card on turn 3 consistently. But this card, you basically need to have played a 2-drop for that to really work out for you.
Right.
You really want to like be able to play it, get a bigger attack, and / have something to put the counter on if it dies. There's just not good common 2-drops when you're playing Obzon. So then you end up in the spot where it's like, how do I make this all work well together? And it's like, well, the answer is you just don't.
Right. You put all the effort into getting your mana together. You run this out and they just kill it. It's just like you kind of question your life choices at that point. Uncommons, Dragonclaw Strike. That's Teamer sorcery with that same hybrid mana cost structure. And it says double the power and toughness of target creature you control. Then it fights up to 1 target creature an opponent controls.
I actually am pretty down on the fight spells in this. I think that you can, of course, play them, and some amount of them, like a Piercing Exhale, can definitely do some work. But in general, I would rather not be relying on having a dragon already in play. That's a big thing. That it's really nice to just be able to use your removal, then play your dragon. So Piercing Exhale and Dragonclaw Strike and Knockout Punch. I mean, there's decks where those cards are good, but I don't think they're actually that great in the 5-color deck if you have sufficient removal otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with Luis 100%. Really good in Teamer. It is really good in Teamer. But
right, if you're a normal Teamer deck that wants Teamer Tawny Foots, the 3-drop 4/3s, and you're just playing big creatures, and that's the kind of deck that gets overpowered by the Dragons deck, but the fight spells are good there.
Next up is Nomad Outpost. So that's the red, white, black Tri-land.
Well, Nomad Outpost is pretty good. I would, and going back to the theme of earlier, like I would take the Molten Exhale over the Tri-land, which is not always something I would have done in a lot of this type of format.
Yeah, this is a really good litmus test, I think, because Tri-lands are premium fixing, right? So this kind of like gives, but Molten Exhale is premium removal as well. So BK, do you agree? How close is that? What would you end up taking?
Yeah, no, I agree. I would take Molten Exhale. The premium removal is too premium. And there's just a lot of also fail-safe ways. Like if you do need to fix a little more between things like Devotees, Embermouth, Sentinel. So, some of those additional sources of fixing are a drop-off in quality, but it's not as far of a drop-off as I have non-functional mana. And as far as like which Tri-lands do we want more, value more? Yeah, you might figure that out as the draft goes on, but ultimately Tri-lands are just nice because tapping for 3 mana is powerful, but turns out in this format not as valuable as just having access to good high quality removal to break up synergies.
And to be clear, there isn't a Tri-land you would take over Molten Exhale here, right?
No, I don't care which one it is.
It doesn't matter which one.
So Teamer and Sultai are the two better ones for this
better
color, because blue-green is the most common set of base colors.
Lie in Wait is our next uncommon. This is black, green, blue for a sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Lie in Wait deals damage equal to that card's power to target creature. This is a very powerful 2-for-1.
It is, but it's not consistent, at least in the 5-color dragon decks. We typically are not playing the kind of the kind of self-mill. You might end up with it. You end up with some more Anak Wayfinders. Great. Now maybe Lie in Wait is more exciting to you. This card does work quite nicely in Sultai, where you just almost, without even trying, will just have a bunch of self-mill. But for this deck, we want our cards to function when we have the mana to do them. We're going to get to see lots of cards in the draft, and we get to play with lots of the colors. Let's at least make sure when we have hit the number of lands and the right colors of lands that our card actually does something, and Lie in Wait does fail that check. I will play it. You do need to make sure you have a critical mass of card advantage in your deck. So definitely will be happy to play it if we need to. But it's not something where it's like, oh, I'm very excited and now I'll find a way to get this card into my 5-color pile.
Yeah, Molten Exhale just does everything so much easily and more clean.
Okay. Last uncommon is Defibrillating Current. This is the black, white, red, again, hybrid mana setup. This is a sorcery that does 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and you gain 2 life. So much more difficult as far as mana goes. You get a little bit of a bump out of the current with the gain 2 life, which is desirable, but it is strictly a sorcery. So this is kind of where when you put it up against Molten Exhale and you have to go, maybe Molten Exhale's like actually just better, like regardless of mana cost, or rarity, right? And you're going like, wait a minute, they really push these exhales. Like that's impressive, right? I mean, that's supposed to be, kind of a premium Mardu card, right? It's supposed to be like, oh, sweet, I got this 3 mana, 4 damage. I'm going to be ahead on mana. I'm going to get a little bit of life back. Yet when you put it in the arena versus Molten Exhale, you could make a pretty good argument that Exhale's just straight up better. It's like, and it's a common.
That's a tough place to be.
That's a tough place to be if you're the Defibrillating Current.
The way I look at it for all of this is they wanted to make dragons a big part of this format. Like Dragons of Tarkir was called basically the same thing, right? Dragons of Tarkir versus Tarkir Dragonstorm. That set was not all about dragons in limited, and especially not at like the common uncommon level. This set, all the cards that say dragon on them are good, and we haven't even really touched on the Dragonstorm Forecaster or Boulderborn Dragon. Mm-hmm. Like we owe those guys an apology. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm. We certainly do. This card, Defibrillating Current, was a card I had a lot of discussions, I guess I could say, with people about. It was just like people were excited to take this, excited to put it in your deck, and it's like, this is a 3-mana removal spell that doesn't kill all the big things.
Right.
It doesn't kill a fair selection of them. And then sometimes even in your deck, which has pretty good mana, it's going to cost 4 mana. And so it was just like, why are we that into this? We're going to get 2 life? Like that's not that much life in a set where you're getting to play all these tap lands that gain you 1 life. And it was funny contrasting that experience with something like Rakshasa's Bargain, which was like, people were like passing that card in their like teamer decks, and it's like,
great for blue-green too.
Right. It's like, this is a real good card as a 4-drop, and maybe you just have some slim outs at casting it for 3. That's an incredible deal. I played Rakshasa's Bargain as a 5-drop most of the time in my Jeskai deck on day 2 because I really needed the card draw. So, you want to not, when you're drafting these kind of clan sets, the designers made some good hooks. They know it's like very exciting to play a card that takes each one of your colors, but that doesn't mean you have to listen to them. You can take a 1-color card if it's just better.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a type of card, we talk about cards being pushed, right? And this is one that wasn't. This could easily have been destroy target creature or something like that. I mean, it's black, white, and red. Like, it's all the removal colors. Like, they could have really uncapped this thing if they wanted, but they kept this one a little bit more contained. So you guys said that you wanted kind of bomby multicolored dragons, and we've got one here. We've got Chico, Paragon of the Way.
There we go.
This is the 2 blue, white, red 4/5 flying vigilance. And when it enters, exile target non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard, copy it. Then you may cast a copy without paying its mana cost. And it reminds you, excuse me.
Salute.
Yeah, thank you. That a copy of a permanent spell becomes a token. So,
Right.
which is more a reminder that you can just do whatever spell you want.
Well, let's just say one of BK's opponents playing for top 8 could have used that reminder because he bounced the Chico not knowing it was going to get to play a creature out of the graveyard.
Oh.
Yeah, not ideal. Yeah, I had so Chico was my pack 3 pick 1 opened in on day 2. If you want to know why I made top 8, here are my my opens and my like winning in draft, so to speak. First pick was Dragonologist.
Oh, nice.
The next pack was Ureni. Which is good. You can find that off Dragonologist. And then third pack, my open was Chico.
Oh, wow. So, wow. Okay. Yeah, that works. Good Lord.
We're good friends. I did some nasty things with Chico. But yeah, this card is phenomenal. Like you get to copy Sig Appraisers and put those back into play.
Gross.
So there's all sorts of nice combos with it, but it just like kind of almost always works. The one play I will make that many players, including myself, try to cheat with Chico is those two-brid hybrid and like 2 cards.
Yeah, you can't put Team Tawny back into play off this thing.
Yeah,
they look like 3 drops. They really are just 6 drops. So you can't do that.
Yeah. So given the discussion we had earlier, easy Chico here?
Very easy. Yeah, this is exactly the kind of like big card that you want. The reason why you're trying to like slow the game down and just get to something is this card is just phenomenal body, 4/5 flying vigilance. And then the selection and immediacy of going into your graveyard, like this card does better than what a lot of Sultai cards are trying to do by like actually just putting the card into play or onto the stack immediately.
Yeah. Okay. And you too, Luis, slam Chico.
Oh yeah, it's not particularly close.
Yeah, that's a nice one. Okay, let's do one more crack-a-pack here. Again, we'll put it under the same lens. First card out is Trade Route Envoy. This is the 3 and a green 4/3, and when it enters, you draw a card. If a creature you control with a counter, if you control a creature with a counter on it, and if you don't draw a card with this way, then it gets a counter. Meh.
5 power, 4 mana creature. There's ways to make this work in tempo decks, but not anything exciting.
Yeah. I mean, this was the card I was worried BK would take in the top 8 because he we'll probably talk a bit more about his draft, but at one point he only had part of a setup for the Dragons deck and a couple blue-green tempo cards. And I was really worried when he was going to take this card, but luckily sanity prevailed.
A rarity for BK. Next is Rugged Highlands. We already talked about that card. After that, one we've talked about a lot this episode, Dispelling Exhale. The 1 and a blue counters something unless they pay 2, and if you behold a dragon, it's 4 instead.
Yeah, Luis, I'm taking this over Rugged Highlands. I just love a phenomenal 2 mana piece of interaction.
Yeah, easy. I actually don't think it's that close, honestly.
And in blue, yeah. Next up,
I just think that you're going to start blue a lot of the time. I think blue's a great color, maybe the best color in this format. Blue and green are both very good, but what I like is all 3 of blue's clans, Temur, Sultai, and Jeskai, I think are pretty good. Whereas you don't want to be involved in the Abzan mess, and I think that Mardu, it's not bad. Like a good Mardu deck is really good, but a lot of the Mardu cards don't play well with others. Whereas the blue-green stuff, one of the reasons starting blue-green is so good, it's so easy to go into Sultai or Temur if you're not going to be 5 colors. And of course, if you're 5 colors, then that's a good place to start too. So very happy starting with an early Dispelling Exhale.
Producer Jeff got us a pretty nice one here. Next card up is Molten Exhale.
Well, I think still take Molten Exile over the Dispelling Exhale. I think it's closer than it probably looks.
Mm-hmm. There's like metagame, like if everybody's on this Dragons deck, you may be happier with the counterspell or something, but given that that's not the case, like, is that
more that just like I just think Dispelling Exile is actually a pretty pushed card, but so is Molten Exile, and I think just having a removal spell that's basically always good is better than one that sometimes can also snag bombs.
Yeah,
I could see a world where you take Dispelling over Molten in like packs 2 or 3 where you had more information.
If I'm going to end up in a non like 4-color value pile mess, it's more likely my deck wants Molten Exile, and if I'm red, that I want Molten Exile than that I'm blue and I really want Dispelling Exile. You might end up in some kind of blue-green, blue-red kind of beatdowny type of deck, and Dispelling Exile could be playable there, but it might not be great. One of the other things I don't think we've mentioned sort of that strikes a little bit against the counter spells, you sometimes have to pay real costs in terms of not playing a tap land to hold them up. When you're in that situation with Molten Exile, you don't really feel that because you get to just actually use your card that turn.
Next is Crotic Nest Guard. That's the 2 and a green 4/4 defender, and you can pay 2 and a green to make it lose defender. Meh.
It's a card to be aware of that you might want to sideboard in against Mardu, but we're not taking it ever early in a pack.
Focus. Yeah, I mean it's in this big swath of cards that is exactly what this deck typically doesn't want, which is like small to medium cards that aren't premium good early interaction, but also aren't very good in the late game. Like this, I mean, look, Sultai and Temur Devotee, totally playable cards. Crotic Nest Guard, if you have to, it does defend you, but you would really rather your cheap interaction be more on the line of the Exhales, which I know are premium commons, especially now that people have a better sense of this deck, but you're surely not taking the Nest Guard anytime early.
Yeah, I mean, these type of decks are almost always built on kind of bookends, right? Where the middle part is less important, the 3s and the 4s, and it usually is more about the 1s and the 2s and the 5s and up. Oftentimes because you need that cheap interaction because you're playing tap lands or you're tapping your mana to do mana fixing or whatever. And we mentioned it a couple of times, but that play that Luis mentioned with the Globe into the Black Exhale, those are the types of plays that can really set you up, for a great play. If your play is Crotic Nest Guard, you're kind of missing the script, Focus the Mind is next, 4 and a blue. Instant it costs 2 less if you cast another spell this turn, and you draw 3 cards and discard a card.
Big Focus the Mind enjoyer over here.
You are?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we had to talk Luis down off the ledge with that card last week when we were testing. Just so many were ending up in his decks.
You should play a lot of them though. They are really good.
It is a good card. Where are you at on it, BK? Are you just making a Luis adjustment, or do you want him to like knock it off of his list?
Well, I think the thing that you just have to sort of recognize with that card is, yes, there's ways you can play it before you have 5 lanes, and yes, it's not going to cost you 5 mana. But for most intents and purposes, this card is a 5-drop. And so factor that into your curve. And we're going to be playing some higher curves, but there are still limits to that. And so this is a 5-mana card that isn't going to impact the board. There is a home for it. There is a place for it because card advantage is very valuable for these decks. But you can't talk yourself into like, oh yeah, I could play like 3 of these and then a bunch of other 5s and 6s.
Not with that attitude. Jeez.
I do think that if you have enough, you do want some amount of card draw. Like some of the games do end up kind of being attrition battles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not going to make a big argument that this is like a fantastic card by any stretch.
That is a good point to bring up though, Luis, because we didn't mention that. We've talked about cheap interaction. We've talked about bombs. We talked about fixing. How many spots do you have left after checking all those boxes for cards like this, like pure card draw spells? BK mentioned the fog draw 3.
Bargain. Oh yeah, Bewilder and Blizzard is amazing.
Yeah, like that card, you can see how, basically taking a turn off from being attacked in many scenarios, plus also bolstering your, drawing 3 cards at once. That's a huge swing. But what about, a little further down the line, like these type of cards, common ones? Do you have, is it just like one slot that you might have for this? Do you want mana fixing in these, or excuse me, pure card draw in these decks?
Yeah, I think that you do, and it's not even just one slot. Like I think there's a lot of Dragon decks that would play like a copy or 2 of this, but the reason it's not a high priority and the reason that I stopped taking them quite so often is you want your high end to be dragons, and you want your Dragonstorms as part of the reason that you get card advantage. You don't want to be in a spot where you're basically spending too much time on just raw card draw, unless it's really pushed. Rakshas's Bargain, that's a really pushed card. Mm-hmm. Like that one I think that you can very easily justify playing and probably should, because it like the rate on these things does matter, and the rate on those is incredible.
Yeah, where are you at on it, BK? You've been really kind of prioritizing the what have you done for me lately kind of aspect of like, I need my card to do something right now when I play it, you know, which is a cost. Needing that is a cost of having to set up more complicated mana. But do you have room for pure card draw?
In some of my decks, I do. I think it's nice when you get to just like sort of boil this down to like a recipe, a formula. Mm-hmm. In the reality, when we're talking about a deck like this, is that we want to be thinking a little bit more nebulously in like sort of the realm of like advantages. Mm-hmm. And so what I mean by advantages is like Chico is a card that gives you advantages, right? Like it gives you an extra, right? You just get a big body with flying and vigilance. It gives you an extra card out of your yard. That's doing the work of some card draw. If you're playing a 5-color ramp control deck, well, why are you ever beating your opponent? You're spending more of your cards on just mana sources. So where are you getting an advantage on them in the game? If you have lots of cheap removal and you don't have the kind of bomb cards that can act as functional 3-4 for 1s, we're going to want more more card draw, like Focus the Mind. And so you need to kind of take stock and look at what is your deck's strengths and what is your deck weaknesses and how do you beat somebody. And so if you have no Dragonstorms, if you have no bombs, but you have lots of strong removal, I've gone so far as to play Cruel Truths, which is like the kind of bad Read the Bones type of card in black, which is kind of a worse Focus the Mind in a lot of ways, because it's like, oh man, I need some way to like eventually 3-for-1 my opponent, 2-for-1 my opponent. So that's where I'm looking. And so the answer is less like play 1, play 2. It's like, take stock of where your deck is at, and can you beat somebody without having card draw. If you can, it's great to maybe potentially play none and just rely on Dragonstorms. But if not, yeah, let's make sure we get some good, solid, old-fashioned card draw in there.
Adorned Crocodile is our next card. It's 4 and a black for a 5/3, and when it dies, you get a 2/2 zombie, and it does have Renew for black, and you can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature.
It's a tricky card. I think the most common thing I've done with this card is be a sort of entomb target for Lotus Light Dancers, the Sultai rare that lets you search up a green, black, and blue card to put in your graveyard. Yeah, this card doesn't really do anything that we particularly care about. Funny. Like, it's like, this is like emblematic of like Abzan and Sultai, like graveyard synergies just not being that exciting. It's like, oh, I milled this over and then I could pay 1 mana to exile this creature and get a single +1/+1 counter. It's like, okay, what does that do against a dragon?
Right.
Not much.
Yeah, turns out crocodiles aren't quite dragons.
I have yet to put Adorned Crocodile in a deck.
Yeah, I haven't played it yet either. My opponent played it, and I was kind of happy. I mean, BK wants it to start in his graveyard, so not the best.
Oh, if that card started in my graveyard, I'd actually be
then it would be kind of good. But the problem is you have to draw it sometimes because it doesn't. Next is Salt Road Pack Beast, 5 and a white for a 4/3 that costs 1 less for each creature you control, and when it enters, you draw a card. You know, I got to say the mobilized decks that can power this thing out for a few mana, it's annoying. Like this is a nice curve topper for those type of decks.
I mean, those decks play so many cards where it's like, oh my gosh, if my opponent doesn't have removal and then I combine it with this card where if they don't have removal for it, something will happen. So every time you play a card in Mardu, which is like good against removal, like this 4/3 cantripping body is, you're just like, oh, what a breath of fresh air this is.
Yeah, totally. But, you know, I will say the strategy that you talked about earlier, BK, about heading off these type of strategies at the pass, not waiting for them to get their mobilized trigger before blocking, let's say, and trying to deal with their creatures that way. That does, if you can do that, if you prioritize the exhales, the cheap removal that gets these things off the board before they can even turn sideways, then cards like Salt Road Pack Beast, you know, instead of costing 2 or 3, they cost 5, you know, or 6 mana, and they do look a lot worse.
Yeah, it's an unreliable one, just like a lot of the things are in the Mardu deck. But this is a card that I'm pretty happy. I basically think you just kind of have to play as many copies of this card as you can. You don't have to take it over everything, but it's like I would just never cut these, even though you will have some downsides.
Right.
I agree.
Last comment is Rebellious Strike. This is the 1 and a white instant. Target creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn, and you draw a card.
Yeah, it's an interesting trick. You want to be playing with some number of cards like Alicia's Legacy, Rebellious Strikes, Fire Rim Form in your Mardu decks to ensure that you can still attack your mobilized creatures and do a variety of board states. Which ones you play and prioritize, it kind of depends upon a little bit of which one your clan is. Rebellious Strike is going to be nicer when you're red, white, or Jeskai, and you're getting some additional flurry synergies, which this one will help fuel from the card draw aspect.
Yeah, it's funny. In the last few years, they've had a few cards like this that bumped only the power, but when the thing died, you got like a creature, like a 3/2, or, a body was left over. And those actually performed quite well. And I know that players like us see draw a card and we're like, hey, that's pretty nice. But, this does fall short of that. Like, I think you'd much rather have it get replaced by some type of onboard presence right now rather than a card for later. And I think that the Rebellious Strike probably suffers a bit.
Yeah, this is more of like a weakness in your game plan that you need to take care of, and Rebellious Strike helps it. It is not your game plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked at, when you looked at the spoiler and the mechanics, it's like, I wonder if there's like a Jeskai deck that's going to want this card and be doing some cool stuff. And it's just, the answer is like, no, that's not where you want to be. And this card is just not one I've frequently found myself wanting to cast.
Uncommons Inspirited Vanguard. I just think that was inspired this whole time. 4 and a green for a 3/2. And when it ETBs or attacks, it endures 2.
This card is okay, but this is exactly the kind of card I just don't want in my deck. It's like, well, it's not as good as any of the big dragons, and it, if it survives, it gives you some amount of upside, but it's just not really very impressive.
Green is not a particularly good color in this format at getting removal out of your opponent's hands early. So like even when you're drafting like green Abzan or Sultai, it's not like you get to like bait them out and then you drop this and it's like this just takes over. That's not really the way it works. And it kind of like gives you like this hard choice too of 3/2 or 5/4. And if you choose 5/4, you get just destroyed by cheap removal a lot of the times. And if you choose 3/2, it's like, well, then it's like the next attack is going to pretty often be hard to make. And even if they kill it, all you were left with is a 2/2. This just isn't doing nearly as much for what we'd like to see from our 5+ mana cards in this format when we're talking about things like dragons and Ice Ridge Serpents and Constrictor Sages.
Right. It's just a little bit too stuck in that middle ground. Next is Gurmag Rakshasa. This is the 4 black 5/5 menace, and when it ETBs, one of your guys gets +2/+2 and one of theirs gets -2/-2.
A lot to like about this card. The biggest strike against this card is that it costs double mana of one color. And so that immediately makes it a lot weaker than it first looks, because you're oftentimes going to be like, have that 5 color fixing, that ability to search up one basic land, and you would need to get the second black to make that work. But this is totally a respectable like top end card to play in a mid-range deck, and it's a nice creature to recur for Sultai decks, but not something I'm going to prioritize largely because of that second black pip.
Yeah. Once again, it's expensive and it's not a dragon. What are we doing? Like
right.
that is that there aren't that many cards that cost 6 mana that I want in my deck that aren't dragons. It's just not really what I think this format is about. Yeah,
but these last 2 cards are both very reasonable Magic cards. They're just up against, gold and even sometimes easier to cast gold cards. That's very tough. Next is Opulent Palace. We mentioned, the premium Tri-lands being the Teamer and the Sultai, and we have the Sultai one here.
Ooh, I don't mind that one. I think Molten Exhale is still ahead of that one, but it is close, and I wouldn't be unhappy if it. Here's it's a little different than the earlier con sets. I was typically pretty happy if I first picked Tri-land in those sets. This set, because of all the reasons we said, I'm no longer on that page.
Yeah. I think if we were to stack rank all of the cards in the set by their pack 1, pick 1 value, we'd end up with Molten Exile and Opulent Palace pretty close to each other. So not going to fault somebody if they took Opulent Palace here.
Okay. Yeah, this was kind of the hypothetical I put forward in the last pack, and we actually have it here. Last uncommon is Equilibrium Adept. This is the 3 in a red 2/4, and when it enters, you exile the top card of your library, and you can play it until the end of your next turn. And then it has Flurry. When you cast your second spell each turn, this guy gets double strike.
Jeskai is a tricky deck to pull together. This card helps. the fact that this card isn't exactly doing what Mardu decks want to do, which is like sort of like have a plan with their card sort of in advance and contribute to mobilize synergies, knocks this card down a fair bit. But I've been happy with this card in Jeskai mid-range decks, and but that's not the ideal place I'm looking to be early on. So it's a little more narrow than it looks like for a 4-mana mono red card. But there's things to like, but ultimately not going to try to draft this one early.
Yeah, this kind of sits in a kind of awkward color and spot in the curve that makes me just not that interested in playing it.
Yeah, I mean, I like the card. Like, it's a 2-for-1. It's a body that gives you something to do. It hits a reasonable spot on the curve. It makes you get your land drops. Like, it's a good card, but I agree, especially under the lens of this, bigger deck that we're kind of focusing on. Rare is called Stadium Headliner. This is the red 1/1 with Mobilize 1. And you can pay 1 in a red and sack it to have it deal damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature.
This is the kind of card where if Mardu was great, you'd be pretty happy to be taking this one early. And it's like, it's a really strong card. I don't really see a good reason to start Mardu in this format. I just don't think, like, I'm not convinced that this card's better than Molten Exile anyway, but let's say it were. I just don't think you have a very strong incentive to be like, yeah, I want to be Mardu, so I'm going to take Mardu over a more flexible red card.
1-drops in this format are not there's not that many 1-drops, period, and they didn't put that many because in a format where like even your aggro decks want to be playing with a couple of tap lands, the best time to do that is on turn 1. And so it's not that this isn't better than playing a tap land on turn 1, but that it has some opportunity cost associated with being a turn 1 play versus our tap land, which might mean we can't play our 2-drop or 3-drop on curve. So there's definitely a lot to like. This is a card you should play if you're Mardu, and it's a card you can maybe start to lean your deck more heavy red. But none of the things that we're describing here are reasons for you to wanting to be getting ahead so fast. This is just like pure tempo, a little bit of interaction. It's fine, but it's not anything that's like this is going to determine the shape of the game. And so when we're talking about that kind of space, we want to be looking at more powerful, more consistent options.
So what's the pick? Molten Exile?
Molten Exile. Pretty easy. Been happy enough to recommend you guys take the cards that I drafted on day 2 for both of these pack 1 pick ones.
Oh, there you go. All right, let's do a few cards just to kind of highlight and, use as a way to talk about what's going on in the format, and then we'll call it a show here. First up, Luis, you have Naga Fleshcrafter here.
Yeah, I wanted to mention once more, we talked out in the Mirror Mythic review, you can cast this, choose nothing, it goes directly to the graveyard, and then you can use the renew ability. It just came up in the spotlight multiple times for multiple people that is a play you could make. So I just wanted to give people that announcement again. Very good card still. Riverwalk Technique I wanted to mention because I found myself really liking having one of those. It's just been really, really key to just have a hedge against a Jeskai Revelation or a Death Begets All, just you want ways to answer some of their best cards, and Riverwalk Technique does it in a very low cost way because it's like, well, this card also is just a very solid piece of interaction.
Yeah, I've found using the negate side of that has come up more than I thought it would already. Like I pretty quickly, like if the board's stable, I'll transition to trying to hold that up just because there are some of those devastating spells that can be out there. Occasionally you could just use it on a removal spell or whatever, but when it hits one of the big ones is when you're really kind of happy. What is aggressive negotiations again?
That's the look at their hand, make them discard a card, and then put a +1/+1 counter on one of your creatures. A card that I think you should main deck in sealed if your mana works for it, and is a very good sideboard card in draft. You play against someone who's got any of these 6+ cost cards, like it is a good way to fight them. So that card is definitely better than it looks, especially in a best of 3 situation. Cruel Truth BK touched on. If it's an extremely poor mage's version of card draw of Rakshasa's Bargain or Focus the Mind, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. One that I've gone down on a lot is Rot Curse Rakshasa, the mythic 5/5. When it attacks, it dies, and then you can exile from a graveyard to decay a bunch of their stuff. The biggest reason is that I think the aggro decks just aren't good, and this card in a non-aggro deck is quite poor. So I just don't think this card is good anymore. BK mentioned the channel Dragonfire Twin Bolt stuff, which is basically that the 2 damage spells aren't that good. I ended up not playing channel Dragonfire in my sealed deck, which I assuredly would have done on like the first couple of days of playing sealed. It just, we played it enough that it's like, wow, shocks are really at an all-time low.
That's crazy. I mean, this is all such great news, by the way, but yeah, we're just like, yeah, 1-drops aren't, you don't want to be there. You know, counters are good. Two damage spells are out. You know, this is just too good.
Fleeting Effigy, the Goblin Guide, the 1 red for a 2/2 haste. In a Flurry deck, this card can actually be pretty good. And in a Mardu deck, when you have like War Effort, which is another card I'm about to mention, just because it can do enough stuff, do a little bit of damage, trigger your Flurry things, trigger your War Effort. This card is better than it looks, and there are some decks that could very much take advantage of it. Speaking of War Effort, it's a pretty polarizing card. So it's got quite poor stats on 17 lands, or at least it did the last time I checked. This is the enchantment for 3 and a red, where all your creatures have +1/+0, and when you attack, you make an additional 1/1 haster. It basically is it's mobilize 1 if you attack, like because it itself doesn't attack. But a number of people who are good were like, this is the best uncommon, or I would take War Effort over every non-rare in the set, you know, at the spotlight. But it's also like, I'm not in that camp, by the way, but it's also got pretty bad stats. And I think part of my problem with it is, again, it's a very committal card. You not only have to be Mardu, you have to be a very aggressive version, which that's most versions, so that's not a big hurdle to clear. But I think that War Effort is the kind of card that its stats get hurt by people putting in a decks they shouldn't, you know, and I think that is more true of a card like War Effort than a card like Molten Exile or Ugin. But it's hard for me to completely set that aside. Like I have not always wanted to put this card in my deck or take it, and I think that it's pretty reasonable to be passing War Effort, even though some people really swear by it.
Yeah, I just did a quick search, and it is kind of interesting. I filtered by top players. Probably sample size actually okay. 60.7% for top players. So that's good. Yeah. That lines up with what people are saying. Yeah.
But my main issue is that it's very committal. So I wanted to highlight that it's better than a lot of people think, but also say like this is an extremely Mardu card. So you don't need to go, take this over Molten Exile. I wouldn't do it.
Right. And to highlight that, for all players, it's 55.7.
Right. That's a pretty big jump. And that's the exact kind of card where I'd expect to see that kind of delta.
And like you said, that means it's in the wrong decks a lot of the time.
A couple other cards. Right of Renewal is a 3 and a green, get back 2 permanents from your graveyard and shuffle 4 cards from your graveyard into your library. At first I was like, oh, this is going to be great in the 5-color mirrors. It prevents decking and all that. And yeah, there are some specific matchups where this can give you that little boost to get across the finish line. I have decked myself. I've decked other people. You get 2 Rakshasas Bargains in your deck. You're at a higher risk of doing that sort of thing. But the big cards are so good at ending the game nowadays that I don't think this card's a priority. And even even if you did need that, if you have like a Sagu Wildling or something like that that has a Omen card that doesn't draw a card, which surprisingly a lot of the Omen cards actually do draw cards. But if you have one of the ones that can just continuously reshuffle, that's a little bit of a hedge against decking. And mostly it's like the games just get ended by dragon, not by decking. So Right of Renewal, interesting card. The circumstances where it's good have been kind of few and far between, at least for me.
I've been aiming a little too low. I've been shuffling my opponent's lands back into their library.
Well, that I think in the mid game is actually like fine if you were going to cast the card, but I wouldn't put it in my deck for that reason, of course.
No. I also got 2 permanents back from mine.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, of course. Glacial Dragon Hunt. That's the blue-red, draw a card, and then you can discard a card. And if you discard a non-land, it deals 3. Don't discard a land to this card. I've had multiple opponents discard a land. It doesn't do anything. You're just putting a card in your graveyard. So you don't have, if you have no bolt to cast, don't discard a land.
It's just a May, right? Like yeah. It's either discard a spell and turn it into a lightning bolt or don't. But don't discard a land. Yeah.
One of the things that BK lightly touched on is that cards like Mammoth Bellow are actually worse than they look, in part because I think bounce is very good against the 5/5s, and I think playing Icespire Serpent, the 5-mana 3/3 bounce creature, part of the reason we like the card is because of, again, specifically Mammoth Bellow. I'm not saying Mammoth Bellow is a bad card, but I thought it was like a premium uncommon, and I no longer think that. I think it's gone down quite a bit in my estimation. It's also like they hit it with like one of the exile effects, like the O-ring, the Stormlight Detainment, and then they can pick it up their own Stormlight Detainment, or you can't disenchant their Stormlight Detainment because there's nothing under it. Like it just opens you spending a lot of mana on a token, and there are ways to kind of take advantage of that. So Ureni's Rebuff, the bounce spell, is very good against this card, for example.
So you took it from premium to good,
playable, yeah.
Playable, fine,
playable to good. Like
okay.
It also, the other thing that has made me move down on it, there's multiple factors, is again my 5 mana spells I would prefer if they were dragon.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, so Dragonstorm Forecaster, 1 blue 0/3, 2 tap, go get a Dragonstorm Glove or a Boulderborn Dragon. The Boulderborn Dragon's really good because it's 5 mana 3/3 flying vigilance when it attacks Surveil 1. It looks bad. Turns out if you have a globe, it's all of a sudden a 4/4, which is just good. It enables all your exhales and your other dragon cards, your dragon storms, and you can search it up with the Forecaster. I've played multiple of these. In fact, BK hopped on and did a video with me right after he won the Spotlight. We had 4 of these in our deck, 4 Boulderborn Dragons, and they were great. We had a bunch of dragon storms. We had 3 red dragon storms. We had a globe. We had a Forecaster, and that whole thing is good. And I view the Dragonstorm Forecaster as kind of like a premium uncommon at this point.
VK, are you high on it too?
Yeah, I am. I took one in pack 3 of the top 8 draft with it was 4th pick in pack 3, and I had a Boulderborn Dragon in my sideboard, and I was just like, well, if these next 4 packs, if there's a globe in there, it's going to be real nice. Yeah.
What is the
actually,
bar? Do you need both?
I guess I should. You basically need to have, I would say, 2 targets to play it, and the globe is more important. Like I would play that card with 2 globes and no Boulderborns. I probably wouldn't play it with 2 Boulderborns and no globes, because I would probably also just cut the Boulderborns. So The globe is kind of the key piece. In fact, I should probably mention that my one loss on day 2 was just getting absolutely mushed in a 5-color dragon mirror by an opponent who had Forecaster both games against me, and I didn't. And it's just the value was insurmountable.
Yeah, what a format! What a win, BK. That was awesome seeing you take it down. Very cool that everyone came to Denver. We got to play. We got to test a bunch, and the testing paid off. Like we actually had one of us take it down, so it kind of felt like, oh, we did figure some good stuff out, and you got to reap the rewards there.
Yeah, great job, BK. It was super fun to watch you win that thing. I mean, I've been following your career forever, and it was just like, oh man, he's so close. And then you actually were able to seal the deal. What was going through your mind when that happened? I think people don't realize that winning an individual professional level tournament is not something that happens for every Magic player, even ones who've played professional career for years. It doesn't. We measure things in top 8s.
Yeah, I won a team Grand Prix before, but I never won an individual Grand Prix. So this was the largest individual tournament I've ever won. I mean, I mostly have stopped playing tournaments, not because I don't love Magic and because I don't love competing, but just, there's other things in my life I'd like to do. And it's a big time commitment. And I'm also one of those kind of people where if I play in a tournament that I'm not well prepared for, that I haven't tested a bunch for, it just kind of eat at me, like all of the losses I had because I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing in those spots. And so it was nice to dip my toes back into all right, I'm going to commit, work with Luis, work with our friends to really be prepared. And it's obviously it's super exciting to win a tournament, your hometown tournament especially. And I had a lot of people to thank, and I'm just I'll have this memory for the rest of my life that I got to win this tournament. It was special for sure. Yeah,
it's really, really fun to watch. Great job, man. It was it was a special moment for sure. Let's call it a show there. Thanks guys for so much great information.
Well, I want to interject real quick because BK mentioned, what he wants to prioritize and spending his time. BK is looking for work. He's a very talented game designer. I worked with BK for a number of years at Direwolf Digital, and then we've collaborated on a bunch of different things and had a ton of conversations. And I can wholeheartedly say he's an excellent game designer. So if anyone is looking for or has leads on game design positions, then definitely hit BK up. You can find him pretty easily online, or you can just shoot me or Marshall a message and we can relay it. But winning the spotlight is great. it's not a career, and I would love to see BK have something to focus his energies on.
Oh, that's cool.
That's very kind of you, Luis. Yeah. So like Luis mentioned, I'm on Twitter. You can DM me there. I'm on LinkedIn. And yeah, last 7 years of my career has been game design, but I've worked in tech and done some other project management kind of things as well. So yeah, if you just want to reach out and say hi, you can find me, like I mentioned, on Twitter, LinkedIn. Maybe we set up a time to talk, and it's always cool connecting with fellow Magic players. There's a lot of interesting folks out there doing neat things in the world. So I think I could help out your team. If you think so, hey, maybe we'll find a time to talk.
Yeah, where can people find you on Twitter and LinkedIn? I'll put a link in the show notes for that so they can. But
I can send you a link to both of those. But on Twitter, if you search on Andrew Baeckstrom on both platforms, you'll find me easy enough. And I'm a friendly guy, so don't worry. I'm gonna have Luis has really prepared me well for treating all kinds of feedback with warmth and positivity.
That's been a side project of Luis's for years now, to get you a good thick skin about feedback.
Doing him a favor, like I've always said.
Yeah, well, with friends like these. Well, that's great, BK, and I'll put that in the show notes as well, those links. So if anybody wants to try to get a hold of you, they can do so. Thanks for carving out the time for us, BK, too. We really appreciate it. We know, the life of a champion, you don't have a lot of time for stuff like this, so we really appreciate it.
Hey, it's always a pleasure chatting with you, Marshall. I can't emphasize that enough.
If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. And again, I'll have BK's links in the show notes as well. If you want to find anything related to the podcast, it's going to be over at lrcast.com. All the episodes of the show are up there. All the gory details from every episode we've done are up on lrcast.com, as well as links to all of our stuff on the front page of that. I want to thank everybody who supports us on Patreon, as well as our sponsor, Ultimate Guard, for supporting the show. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
So I had a weird intersection of my worlds collided. Yesterday we started playing a new video game called Blueprints. It's a kind of like a exploration deck builder game. You're like exploring this mansion and drafting rooms as you go. And really cool game, really cool concept. Had heard a lot of good stuff about it, and we're booting it up, and it said like created by Tonda Ross. And you might not know who that is, Marshall, but
I don't.
He's the owner of Mythic Spoiler.
Okay.
And had done graphic design work for CFB many years ago.
Oh, cool.
And he had been working on this game forever. And all of a sudden it's like, wait, this is the game he'd been working on? It just is completely blown up. It's like going to win a bunch of Game of the Year stuff. It's
wow.
It's like a really popular game right now. Like you are going to hear more about it for sure. And it was crazy. I'm like, wow, like I had no idea. And then you go to Mythic Spoiler, and he's even got like a section that's like, from orange to blue. He talks about how he's been working on Blueprints for 8 years, and basically all the money he made off Mythic Spoiler, like all the revenues just channeled into working on that.
Wow.
And it's so cool seeing indie game developers kind of just like crush it and, make such an awesome game. I shot him a quick email this morning, and he shot me back an email he had sent me 6 yeyears ago that had a screenshot of the game. And
wow, that's incredible.
And I was catching up with Andy Cooperfest, him, of course, because he had worked with me and him were the ones who would like work with Tonda. And it's just very cool when something like that happens. And of course, I can't recommend the game highly enough, but honestly, it doesn't need my recommendation. It's gonna completely crush it at this point. And
wow,
just cool to see Magic players doing cool things. That's and plus, it's a new cool game to play, so that's another upside too.